Hi y'all, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to a video that is going to be exceptionally embarrassing because this video is going to make me have to admit how much of a basic bitch I really am. You guys will probably, the video where I was talking about what Morphe palettes I would buy if Morphe didn't suck and I didn't hate Morphe. On that video, one of you commented and were like, please do this with other brands. I think they specifically said Too Faced, which is what we're doing today. I have in the works one for Urban Decay, probably gonna do Tarte. Let me know down below some brands you would like to see me do this with. And like I said, what that is talking about palettes I would buy from these companies, I guess, if I had unlimited money, or if I had any faith in their quality consistency, or if I were just in a situation where I ended up being a little bit less critical of what they're releasing. I thought it was just a really fun idea, and it's been really fun and interesting to really go back through time and be like, oh, look at that. Oh, okay. Because let's be honest, there have been some palettes that have come out where I'm like, the basic girl in me really wants that, but the alternative, makeup-loving, transformative Soraya knows that it's not gonna get a lot of use in my collection. But that doesn't make the me wanting it go away. Oh, I'm trying this new, like, blue raspberry caffeinated seltzer, and it's effing me up right now. Like, that shiz tastes good. It tastes like blue raspberry cotton candy, and it has caffeine in it, so F me up. But we're just gonna go forward and go through some of these palettes that I would buy if Too Faced were consistent and all that jazz. Okay, we might as well start out of the gate with one that I think, the funny thing is that some of these, I've definitely torn a new one, so like I said, we're unveiling, we're revealing the basic bish Soraya. And one palette that I would have bought that I didn't was the pumpkin spice palette. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is a palette that I would have bought because I'm like, oh, look at that color story. Look at how innovative and pumpkin spicy this color theory is. Because we all know that Too Faced, when it comes to like themes or honestly any of their palettes, we've reached a point of doing the bare minimum. We're gonna put like a little bit of pumpkin in there and a little bit of spice, but it isn't really going all the way. But when the first leaf hits the ground, or even before the first leaf hits the ground, because I live in Virginia, and in Virginia it's October and it's still like 78 degrees. But I live for the spooky pumpkin spice season. And so to have a brand be like, okay, we're gonna take that, we're gonna capitalize on the pumpkin spice. I love it every year whenever we get the pumpkin spice thing and it like becomes a Dune reference and we're like, those who control the pumpkin spice control the universe. Because it's spice and it's Dune and it's funny. So I think this may have been one that I would have just been like, oh, well, I want it because it's kind of pumpkin spicy, because I can feel all kinds of snazzy and fall-like when I use it on my eyes. But most of you know that at this point in my life, the reason I didn't buy it is because I've become a lot more cutthroat with what I like bringing into my collection. A kind of slightly pumpkin spicy color story isn't enough for me to want to spend $49 on it. But if I was independently wealthy and I was able to buy whatever kind of shiz I wanted, and if Too Faced didn't have a terrible reputation for having inconsistent quality control, I probably would have bought this and reviewed it. I can't remember the last Too Faced palette I bought and reviewed because they just haven't really been doing it for me. Y'all have seen this in my videos recently. Not even recently, in like the past year and a half. Too Faced just out here doing whatever they want like a wild child and thinking they're gonna get us all to buy in up on this pumpkin spice shiz. So, it's a thing. I lost my handy dandy notebook. But kind of in the same vein of pumpkin spice, we also have the Gingerbread II, the second incarnation of the Gingerbread palette, which I actually bought that palette. I reviewed it. I believe I gave it a fairly positive review. If I can remember, I will leave that down below. And this was pre pumpkin spice. So I remember when that came out, it was sort of this thing where they were all like, oh, hey, here's this Gingerbread II. And I was like, okay, they're not going to give us a pumpkin spice palette. They're just going to take gingerbread and change it slightly, rearrange it just a little bit so that it's different enough from the original that they can justify selling it to us. But in reality, it was just a reworked version of the first one, and if you had the first one, you pretty much didn't need the second one. But if I were back in my Too Faced, like, gotta buy all the 10 palettes, I would have had this shit, and I bought them all the way up through the white chocolate bar. I got Clover. I mean, I had a whole bunch of them. Y'all know I've decluttered 99.99999% of my Too Faced collection. I kept the Sweet Peach Peachy Mattes because that shiz is fire. But I totally would have gone for the second gingerbread, if anything, just for the sake of it being, you know, oh, well, I have the one and I need the second one because if I don't have the second one, the first one's going to be lonely. It needs a sibling. It's like me with cats. I'm constantly asking my 2 cats, I'm like, are you guys ready for a brother or a sister? And my parents and my husband are like, no. And so kind of in the same vein with this, it's like, oh, look at these. I would have liked to bought them if I weren't as critical of the majority of things that Too Faced releases, which has been basically everything recently and so far. I would have been all like, let's get a little bit of Gingerbread II all up in here, because I admit, I enjoyed the first one. I decluttered it because I have come to realize that Too Faced does not have one of my end-all be-all eyeshadow formulas. And I'm sure I had these colors in other palettes, so when I was decluttering, I was like, is there really a reason for me to keep this if I have the colors from other eyeshadow formulas that I love and use? Am I holding on to this for the sake of having all of these Too Faced palettes even though I'm not using them? I believe it was 2019 and 2020 were very, very revealing years for me, figuring out all of my toxic behaviors towards makeup. And I had come to the realization that no, I don't need all those Too Faced palettes, and because Too Faced doesn't have a eyeshadow formula I love, it kind of makes me pump the brakes on any of their stuff. Like, I just don't have it in me to try, to have it in me to really risk the possibility that this $49, $58, $55 palette isn't going to be quality that I can trust. Now, with that being said, from brands whose quality I trust, like Melt Cosmetics, they just did the Mary Jane palette, and that was a dud. So maybe Too Faced can come around and turn it around and create a formula that actually F's me up. But that hasn't happened as of yet. Then a definitely more recent one. As of filming this, I think this is like their most recent palette, and that is the Teddy Bear palette. Now, I will say I've seen this palette in a couple different pictures and a couple different like saturations and exposure, and like one picture it'll be like really light and the other picture will be like deep dark and saturated, and I'm like, which one is it? Because if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that promo pictures are exceptionally deceptive. That's why I like seeing YouTubers actually hold and handle and use the product, because I'm able to see, all right, what does it actually look like? What is the non-photoshopped version of this palette going to be? And I mean, I must admit, I am a sucker. As much as I present like this, there is a part of me that's all like cute and kitschy and kawaii and adorable, and I like that kind of sweet aesthetic when I don't present like this. And so you have this, and it's all like teddy bear, like bearing it all. So it's like cute and sensual without being in your face, like say Better Than Sex mascara, DSL, Lady Balls, Glow Job. I mean, it's doing it in a way that I find appealing. I mean, we've talked about Too Faced and all of their, however they're trying to do like feminism and sexualization. They're kind of, the person on the team who's managing that isn't doing a very good job. But this I looked at and I was like, I remember I talked about it in an anti-haul and I'm like, oh, this is nice. This is cute. cute. And I remembered probably the reason I think it's nice and I think it's cute is because it's the least mediocre thing that they've released in like the past 8 months. And so it wasn't really the palette was any kind of like new and revolutionary and exciting. It's just that compared to all the other drivel they've released, this was somewhat viable. And so a part of me was just like, oh, look, she's cute. She'd be fun. She'd be nice. When in reality, I'm sure I've got that shiz 110-fold in my eyeshadow palette collection already. Y'all know, as much as I've been on a neutral kick recently, I have my neutrals that I know and love. I got Natasha Denona Glam. I got Natasha Denona Bronze. I got Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam. I got Melt palettes. I have neutrals that I know and love. I have been using also my Viseart Grand Pro 1 and that palette has effed me up. I'm actually wearing it on my eyes today except for the shimmer. That's the Child palette from Colourpop. But long story short, I've got plenty of neutrals. I'm good. You know, this is really cute and really sweet. I like the little teddy bear embossing. They had that highlighter that was going to be way too deep for me. You all know. That Soraya of yesteryear would have seen that shiz, that cute little teddy bear whatever highlighter, and I would have bought that shiz. And then about 8 months later, I'd complain about it because it would be too big to store in my regular highlighters. And I would end up decluttering it because it would be too dark for me because I bought it because it was cute. I mean, it's basically the Clover Puppy Love highlighter all over again, except for the fact that that one actually worked on my skin. It just didn't work formula-wise. But if I were back in the day and I were purchasing from Too Faced still, this is one that I honestly wouldn't feel bad about reviewing. Like I said, I think compared to a lot of the products that Too Faced has been releasing, this is an eyeshadow palette that I think has a bit more staying power within their collection, as well as, you know, just within the makeup environment. The next one makes me sad, not because I'm like, yeah, I totally buy these, but what they remind me of. And I think these are somewhat new. I was just scrolling through Trend Mood and being all like, no, I was scrolling through Too Faced Instagram and I'm like, all right, what palettes have they released? How long? How back can we go? And these are their little mini 6-pan palettes and the That's My Jam, Let's Play, Kitty Likes to Scratch, and Light My Fire. Partly because these little concise ones, honestly, have, I feel, better color stories than a lot of their larger palettes. Too Faced tends to do this thing, especially with their holiday palettes, where they'll just basically take the kitchen sink and vomit a bunch of eyeshadow into these palettes, and there's no really rhyme or reason as to why the colors are there. And I understand we do it for the, oh, you get so much variety. I mean, variety is great, but if there's not a cohesive color story, what's the point in having it? If it's just this big giant jumbled mess that doesn't make any sense, I don't understand. And so looking at these, I was like, oh, that's a cute little color story. I know the That's My Jam was really cute. I did like the Kitty Likes to Scratch. Light My Fire is totally my tones. You know, like always, these are colors that I already have. I've reached a point in palette saturation in my collection that the majority of eyeshadows I own and that come out aren't something that I don't already have. Unless you're like Kaleidos, and then every time they release a palette, I'm like, I don't got that shiz. But what these really do for me is I look at these and I understand, I think I know what Too Faced is trying to do, is they're trying to sort of harken back. I mean, we all remember those coveted little palettes that they released and then they started releasing really crappy ones and then they stopped releasing them. But I mean, I remember back in the day when the peanut butter and jelly was like the little mini palette to have. Everybody loved it. Everybody effed with it. I mean, I had like all of those. I had the country one, I had the rock one, I had the kitten one, I had the like naturally pretty one before it was reformulated, I had the macaroon one, and I held on to those for so long because I'd look at a single shade and be like, one day I'm gonna use you and that's gonna be the end of everything. It will be magnificent and that moment will justify the fact that I've held on to these things well long past their expiration date. I mean, y'all, I bought some of these shiz before I got married and I'm gonna be married 5 years this year. That's a long time to hold on to some eyeshadow. And so looking at these, I'm like, oh, they're so cute. You know, it's the memory, it's the nostalgia, and it's the fact that they're honestly nicer and a bit more compact than those other ones. You all know I live for smaller, concise color story palettes. I mean, I live for large, concise color palettes as well, but I feel like you have a better way of understanding it when it's condensed a little more. I ain't out here trying to have a Morphe palette moment. I mean, these are definitely something that Soraya of, once again, yesteryear would have seen and been like, they're so cute, I need all of them, regardless of if the color stories are interesting or not. Because that's just how I was. And some of the color stories are really cute. Like I said, the Light My Fire one, the That's My Jam one. I'm like, these are cute. These are adorable. I like these. I would buy these, but I'm not gonna because, I mean, y'all know. Okay, let's talk about one that's really embarrassing. I mean, I was going through it. I'm like, yeah, I'd actually buy that. And I felt like a part of me was betraying myself. I'm like, why would you buy this? Why are you attracted to this? You know that this is not something that you need. This is not something that is going to give you any kind of amazingness. And that is that Palm Springs palette. I guess there is something about that god-awful pop of blue or pop of teal, whatever you want to call it. The neutral palette with that one bright, eye-catching color. I mean, the packaging on this, absolutely adorable. But we know that Too Faced can do packaging. 9 times out of 10, the packaging exceeds the quality of the makeup, which is what I feel Urban Decay did with the Prince collection, but that's something we talked about in an anti-haul. I just look at it and it kind of gives me all of these like nice little Barbie vibes, which apparently Barbie's coming back. We hit some kind of anniversary, so those collaborations are gonna come out of the walls like no one's business. And seeing this one, I mean, I guess it's a part of me whenever I see these palettes and I'm like slightly drawn to them for whatever reason, there is a part of me that's like, please, dear God, let this be the one that is actually good. Because there's just so much pathetic stuff that gets released. When you see something that's slightly eye-catching, you're like, all right, this is it. This is going to be the resurrection of this company. And then they release it, and then they keep releasing other things, and then you're just like, no, false alarm. All right, the second coming isn't happening. It just makes me so sad to see these companies just constantly releasing and re-releasing the same stuff over and over again, and stuff that's just there. Too Faced has this habit of just kind of like going along and being like, oh, here's this, and oh, here's this, and they've got all these varying aesthetics while still trying to be themselves. Kind of like the new KVD whatever. I feel like Too Faced is going through almost an identity crisis because they're just, each time they try to do something, they're like, here's this aesthetic, and then they're like, oh, well, I guess we need to proc off the peach, or we need to proc off the chocolate. I scrolled down so far on their Instagram page that they were still posting pictures of their chocolate bar palettes. I was like, how many years ago is this? I think I scrolled to like 2017, and one of the funny things was as I'm scrolling, I'm like, oh, they're releasing a lot less now. Wow, we're not getting a palette every other month? I thought that was kind of interesting, that just as I kind of the same with Colourpop, it's like you go down and you reach a point where you're like, oh, wow, we're taking a breather. It didn't used to always be something every other second. And while scrolling down, I must admit, this is a palette that isn't anything revolutionary color story wise. It's not something that would really give any depth or anything new to my current collection, but I still really wanted it anyway. I remember actually battling with myself and being like, do I do it? It's really not that interesting. It's not that exciting, but do I do it? And that is the collaboration palette with Candy Johnson. If for nothing else, that I love Candy Johnson. I remember seeing her with her bright pink hair and being like, oh, yes, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I remember watching a video of her showing how to bleach your eyebrows. This was pre-Soraya shaving off her eyebrows, and I'm like, well, I want to do something to get rid of them. And I watched her video on how to bleach eyebrows, and I bleached my eyebrows, and I looked absolutely horrible. But she's someone that I look at and I get a lot of nostalgia feeling for. And the palette, for as basic and as just kind of like everything else we've seen before as it was still really, really cute. I loved the packaging. I loved just the whole like candy tin and everything. It was, for all of its, you know, simplicities, it was something that they hadn't done before. Aesthetically, it was true to brand while still being a little bit different. And I feel like Too Faced doesn't do that a lot. They kind of either stay sickeningly sweet or they go completely out in left field. They have a difficult time being consistent with their aesthetic. But I remember I saw so many people hauling it. I was watching, you know, Sephora hauls, Ulta hauls, and people were like, I love Candy Johnson and I bought the palette. And I was just sat over here like, I love Candy Johnson. I would like to buy the palette. But I didn't, you know, it was one of those things that I guess I came to the realization that it was just not worth the money that I was going to pay for it. I don't think we'd reached true enlightenment at that point, but I was kind of edging towards trying to buy less. And at least less from Too Faced. That's definitely something. And it was a really cute, sweet palette. I really I liked how it was formatted. It had the nice little quads going on there. You know, it was simple. It was basic, but it was constructed really well in a very appealing and user-friendly way. I'm sure I would have enjoyed using it if the quality was consistent. You know, if the quality was good and the eyeshadows were good, which, you know, with Too Faced, it's kind of a toss-up for me. I tend to like heckin' pigmented on like the first swipe. Like, I don't want to be sitting there building this shiz up because I got dry eyelids, and the more I build this shiz up, the less likely the next color is to go on. And so I'm sure it would have been fun and great to use, but I honestly am kind of glad that I didn't buy it because it would have been one of those things, I feel like deep in my soul, it would have been one of those things that ended up being, well, you know, I have other colors and formulas that I like better, but I'm holding on to it because it's a really cute palette that's in collaboration with Candy Johnson, and I've been trying so hard to cut that umbilical cord with buying things because of either who they're collaborating with or what the aesthetic is. I try to look at it from a pure makeup, you know, point of view. Aesthetic and everything is absolutely very important to me. Like, I'm in Club Nebula from Kaleidos, F me up. But I like the aesthetic to go hand in hand with the color story and with what I'm getting out of the makeup. Whereas with the Candy Johnson one, I would have gotten aesthetic, it would have been pretty, it would have been cute, but it would have been a bunch of basic eyeshadows that I probably wouldn't reach for a lot. The next one is kind of really a smack to my face because I was scrolling through and been like, yeah, I was tempted by that, I was tempted by that, and I'm like, girl, boy, and they and them. Why are you interested in these palettes? These are basic as basic as you get. And that was when they re-released, repackaged, reformulated those naturally pretty eyeshadow palettes. So the ones that were in the tin packaging, which they then took out and put into packaging that is absolutely god-awfully bulky and huge for the amount of eyeshadow you get in them. Trust me, I know, because I bought the blush palette from that, one of my favorite blush palettes, one of the best products Too Faced has ever released. But that dome packaging and shiz that they put all that shiz into is bulky and heavy. Like, you feel it and you're like, wow, this is a high quality paperweight filled with eyeshadow that may or may not be any good. But with that being said, it's eyeshadow that I looked at and I'm like, oh, because they had the one that was matte and shimmer, and then they had the all matte one, and I'm like, you could take those two and do some kind of like alchemist transfusion and it would be such a pretty neutral palette experience. Like, honestly, if they had taken that shiz and combined it and released it as like this larger naturally pretty palette, F me up, I might actually have bought that shiz because I really enjoyed the tones in those palettes. And y'all know somewhat recently, not today, but I have been going on kind of a neutral kick where I'm like, oh, dope, brown, ochre, ooh. You know, I have been kind of enjoying playing with the more neutral side of eyeshadow. And so I was looking at those and I'm just like, yeah, those are actually really cute. I remember I did think, I'm like, I could review these. I could do that. But at the time, I believe I still had the two tins. I had the one and the matte one, and I'm like, well, what's the point in me buying them again if I have them? And then I ended up decluttering them. You know, it's a whole lot of what ifs and maybes. Because I admit, when it comes to makeup, when it comes to buying anything that I like, I sometimes don't have the ability to pump the brakes on my own enthusiasm. I get an idea in my brain and I'm like, oh boy, this is gonna be the next best thing, and come hell or high water, nobody can stop me. And even now today, I kind of look at them, like I said, when I was scrolling through Too Faced thing and I saw it and I was like, well, those were pretty when they were released. They're pretty now. But I feel like a part of me, like I said, the packaging was really big. It was kind of domed, you know. I'm pretty sure, y'all know, like, probably one of my favorite end-all be-all neutral palettes is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam, probably Natasha Denona Bronze, Natasha Denona Glam, the Melt Cosmetics Rust palette. You know, there isn't, when it comes to Too Faced, I just feel with the kind of eyeshadow colors and pigmentation and color theory, Too Faced just isn't effing up the game enough for me. They're like, basic. Oh, look, here's some more neutrals, basic. Which is fine. Like I said, every once in a while, I'm gonna be a basic bishop in here. But when it comes to the reality of like the kind of more alternative drag-esque makeup that I like to do, I'm a lot more inclined to buy a green tone palette from Melt Cosmetics than a kind of slightly interesting neutral one from Too Faced. But if I had money just kind of coming out my ears, I'd been like, all right, take my dollar notes. I would like to try this formula because there is a part of me that is kind of like intrigued and interested in being like, maybe if I just dip one toe into the Too Faced eyeshadow formula. I just want to see where we're at. But I don't have dip my toe into Too Faced eyeshadow formula money right now. Okay, that is all the palettes I'm going to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in the next one, which is probably going to be Urban Decay. It does take a little bit of time for me to scroll through and kind of think back to a majority of their eyeshadow palettes, and maybe in some brands I don't have enough that I actually would buy because I don't want to just talk about any eyeshadow palette they release, because you all know with Too Faced there ain't any incarnation of their holiday stuff that I would ever touch with a 20-foot pole. But I think I have 3 palettes already marked down from Urban Decay, so I'm pretty excited about finishing that list and filming that video. Would love to hear what y'all have to say about these palettes down below. Let me know if the quality is the bomb diggity shiznit, or if it's absolutely terrible, or other Too Faced palettes you recommend and other Too Faced palettes you love. This is just me, my opinions, me doing my thing, and I hope you enjoyed it. But thank you guys so much for watching. I love you, and as always, keep it real. Mwah!